Would you believe me if I told you this weird little game where you play as an old man that lives in the woods with his pet pig is currently the highest rated JRPG of 2026? Well, believe it or not, it is. And Steam is full of overlooked gems just like this. But I want to fix that. So in this video, I'll be sharing 7 awesome Steam JRPGs I found that you probably missed. And the first game up today is Colossus Eternal Blight. The game is described as a story-driven action RPG with precision combat, a handcrafted pixel art world, and choices that leave real scars. The game had a successful Kickstarter campaign and recently launched in early access. I'll be playing through the demo, which is the opening part of the game, and the developers also sent me a code for the early access version, so we'll check that out after. So in the game you play as Lucian, who's a knight in training. The opening bit is just a tutorial teaching you how to play, and the controls feel pretty good and it looks nice. You can attack, dash, and parry. Later on I'll also unlock different abilities. But what I did not expect was the sound and music to be this good. Sound is kind of a weird thing in games. If it's bad, it really stands out, and if it's good, you don't pay attention to it. But when it's excellent, it can really elevate the entire experience. Everything about the soundscape is impressive. Real variety in walking sounds, the combat sounds intense. There's a lot of great ambient sounds like wind and birds, but let's not forget that incredible music. It's all really fantastic. Just take a moment to soak this all in. Now after the tutorial, I'm let loose a little bit to turn 2 statues the right way. It's kind of a big puzzle where you have to explore around the environments. And I'm exploring the world, fighting, and solving other puzzles. The combat feels great. There's a nice flow of dodging and attacking. That said, something about the parrying just doesn't feel right. There's not a great indicator when they're about to attack, like a wind-up animation or blinking red or something like that. There's this little red streak on the ground, but it's not very helpful for anticipating the parry window. In Souls-likes, there's usually a good indicator when you need to parry. Here the enemy is still, and then the next frame you're getting hit. It just doesn't feel great. And you also level up fairly quickly, which is nice because there's a ton of cool abilities that you unlock. Now there's no equipment, armor, or weapons or anything like that, just potions, 1 for health and 1 for mana. And the map system is pretty good here. You can get a nice lay of the land of where you're supposed to go, but it kind of feels like I'm going the wrong way. Everything looks very similar and there's no map markers. And the game is also very puzzle heavy, and there's 3 main types. You'll be either pushing blocks to stand on switches, picking up blue balls to rest on switches, or flipping switches. And there were quite a few times where I looked at a new area from the overview map and sighed to myself thinking about doing it all, but then when I went and actually did it, it felt satisfying and fun. So if you look at it and feel the same way, just be a little patient with it. Now after a long stretch of puzzles, I make it to the first boss. Here I need to actually learn the parry timing or I'm gonna die again and again. And it's much easier here because the boss actually telegraphs its attacks with these big wind-up animations. Now I still did die once, but I came back the second time and took it down. A very fun fight that involved parrying, dodging, and getting in hits when I could. There are some story bits that I won't spoil after the boss, and that's where the demo ends. But I do have the early access version, so let's check that out real quick. The first thing I noticed is that they added a map marker telling you where you need to go next. But this is sort of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Before, the overview map would just pop up immediately, but now there's this little animation that needs to play out before I can see it. Not the longest thing in the world, but it feels annoying when it was instant before, and it feels like it's just kind of wasting my time. The game now also has gear with these different rings that can give you increases for different stats. Overall, this is shaping up nicely. Combat feels great, sound design and music are awesome, and it seems like the developers are listening to the community feedback and adding things quickly. The parrying system definitely needs some work though, especially for normal enemies, and if I were them, I'd lose that little animation when opening the map, but that's just me. Definitely one to keep on your radar. I'll leave a link to the demo and early access version below, along with all the other games in this video. Alright, next up we have the prototype for A Fighter's Nova Mindara. Now the game is described as a narrative-driven JRPG that fuses character-focused storytelling with the intensity and precision of a true tag-team fighting game. Now they very specifically call it a prototype when you boot it up, and there's even a pre-alpha watermark over the entire thing, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is way better than most demos I've ever played. So let's just dive into the gameplay so I can show you what impressed me so much. Now right away the visuals give me major PS2 vibes, which I'm all about. It looks great. And for the story cutscenes, it uses this really cool manga-inspired presentation with panels that pop up. Now I've personally never seen a game present its story like this before, and I feel like it gives this game a really unique style. Now after the characters introduce themselves to each other, the game jumps into its combat tutorial, and the combat is straight up a fighting game. Now I really suck at fighting games. They typically have complicated inputs, and I'm never patient enough to learn that. Mindara changes all that. The game really simplifies its controls and allows for sick combos. I was able to put together some long juggling strings as I got more familiar with the game. And most people will probably look at this and think of the older Tales games, which is a good comparison, but I feel like Mindara is really doing its own thing. And later in the demo, Maya and Mindara even team up and you can do tag battles, calling each other in and making combat even more dynamic. It's really hard to express just how good this combat feels. It's so fun, and I'm sure someone with better fighting game skills will be a lot better at this than me. Now, a bit after, the tutorial demo introduces environmental actions. For example, Mindara can punch things like rocks to break through barriers, and Maya can throw her boomerang to activate switches. I love gameplay like this. It makes exploring feel more active, and I'm constantly looking at the environment and thinking of ways I can use these abilities. It feels right out of Wild Arms, which is never a bad thing. Now, after a bit of exploring and fighting some random enemies, the demo culminates with a tag battle against Maya's brother. Again, this was super fun. Because he had a tag partner of his own, the battle lasted way longer, so I needed to play differently. Sadly, that's where the demo ends, clocking in just shy of 20 minutes. Now, I'll be honest, I have no negative feedback. Everything about this prototype demo blew me away, from the combat, presentation, exploration, and even the voice acting was pretty solid. Unfortunately, the game is not coming out anytime soon. According to their Kickstarter page, they estimate the game will be released in late 2028, but let's be honest, that probably really means early 2029. Incredibly impressive and one to keep an eye on in the future. But let's take a look at a game that's actually out and you can play right now, and that's Dobbel Dungeon. It's a tactical RPG where you battle across 4 islands, saving villagers, unlocking heroes, and getting stronger. The one catch is that it's a roguelike, but as I'll get into, I really don't think that's a problem, and anyone who enjoys tactical RPGs is gonna absolutely love this one. Now, when you first start the game, it asks you to pick a difficulty. I went with normal as I felt like that would probably be the most balanced and probably the intended difficulty. Now, when you begin the game proper, you're greeted with this incredibly charming cutscene in this amazing clay art style. I remember the Super Nintendo game Clay Fighter replicated a clay-like art style pretty well back in the day, but that's nothing compared to Dobbel Dungeon. What they've done here is remarkable. It's such a unique style. And what really helps is that it runs really well, even on my little laptop. To say the least, I really like how this game looks. As for the gameplay, the game loop is pretty straightforward but addictive. There are 4 islands in the game, the next one unlocking once you've completed the current one, and on each island are a series of randomly generated battles. It could be rescue villagers, a hero for your team, unlock a shopkeeper, or simply just defeat all the enemies. But what I love is each battle is relatively short, like 5 to 10 minutes. A big problem with bigger tactical RPGs is that the battles can get really long, which I think turns a lot of people away from the genre, but these tighter battles make for great pacing. Here's how the battles work. You have 3 characters on your team, and when a character's turn begins, you roll dice. And then you use whatever number you rolled on those dice for actions on your turn. I love the freedom because you can use them for whatever you want. You can attack multiple times a turn, move extra spaces, heal, open treasure chests, and much more. You can even re-roll a die if it was too low for you. What I appreciate though is that the game never feels unfair with low rolls. It feels really balanced, at least on normal difficulty. And as your characters level up, they earn skill points that you can spend on a giant skill board. Everything from new abilities, extra health, using abilities multiple times per turn, or rolling extra dice each turn. And I'll say this right now, unlocking extra dice as soon as possible is the ultimate hack to getting stronger. It completely changes the dynamic of combat. You're just able to do much more each turn. But the game does account for that in later islands. I kind of breezed through the first 2 islands for the most part, but on the third one, I actually had 2 characters die in a battle and I almost lost my run. Thankfully, if a character dies, they don't die permanently. They just become a ghost that's much weaker. And I think I got pretty lucky as one of the shops that I unlocked allowed me to revive fallen characters, and I was good to go from then on out. Dobbel Dungeon also has a gear system, and you can find gear either randomly in levels from chests or from different vendors. And you're given 4 slots per character, and there's really no limit to what you can equip. You could have all potions, all armor, or a mix of both. This is a crucial part of the game. Having the right gear for different levels, for example bosses or element specific areas, probably saved me more than I realized. Now I also mentioned this earlier, but you can also unlock heroes to add to your team. I found an archer and a Viking, however I found my original team of the knight, wizard, and rogue / mage to be the best balanced team, so I kind of just stuck with them for most of the game. Now you'd think that beating the game just comes down to finishing all 4 islands and then beating the final boss, but it actually gets a little more interesting than that. After you complete the second island, and you're given the option to face the final boss just right then and there. The obvious trade-off is that you might not be strong enough. However, for each following island that you complete, the boss also grows in power. There were a few nodes on my skill tree that I wanted to unlock, so I completed the third island before deciding to take on the final boss. She was actually pretty challenging, and I was down to my last guy, but somehow I squeaked out a win and beat the game. It took me around 4 hours, but the game has a turbo mode that lets you speed up battles, so it's probably closer to 5 to 6 hours without it. Now again, you'd think that's all the game has to offer, but you'd be wrong. Out of curiosity, I started a new run just to see if anything changed, and there actually were a few more characters I could unlock that I didn't have yet, like a pirate and an engineer. Now, I didn't end up doing another run, but I plan to because I really enjoyed Dobbel Dungeon. This is a super high quality, tightly paced game that leaves you wanting more. If you love tactical RPGs, there's a lot to love here, a lot to unlock, and higher difficulty levels if you want to challenge yourself. Now, I bought this on a sale for $16, but even at its full price at $20, I think it's a total steal, and this game is criminally underlooked. An absolute gem of a game you should definitely check out. And speaking of tactical RPGs, next up we have the demo for Calame. This game had been receiving a lot of buzz around the time I was making this video and is slated to release in 2026. I wanted to play the demo to see what it was all about, so let's check it out. From what I can tell, this is just the opening few chapters of the game, so I'm going to avoid any major spoilers, but the way the story is presented is pretty unique and intriguing. It's from the perspective of this girl Mora, who's in prison for leading a rebellion against the Empire. She recounts her story to this record keeper, so all the main story and battles are essentially flashbacks. There's some pretty heavy story stuff that happens in the intro of the game, so I wonder if this storytelling method will flip things on its head when it eventually catches up to real time. But what grabbed my attention, and I'm sure is grabbing yours, is this really striking comic book inspired art style. As the demo goes on, there are parts where you can see the seams of the budget poking through, but for the most part, it looks great. All the environments are richly detailed and there's a real sense of place. There's also voice acting, which is surprisingly good. The team at Nextale Games seems to be deploying their budget in clever ways. As for the gameplay, it's a much more traditional tactical RPG like Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics. You move across a grid-based map, each character has unique abilities, there's pretty deep environmental interactions, and while I wouldn't call the game hard, it feels challenging in a good way. You can't just toss your strongest character on the front line and expect them to face tank everything. You need to be clever and actually use all the tools at your disposal. For example, this first battle is relatively small, but it teaches you a few important things about the game. As I just mentioned, running head-on into a fight isn't always the best option, as one of my two characters went down. You need to be clever and use your abilities to take advantage of the environment. These pumpkins, for example, can be used to damage enemies with a totally separate resource pool that you can activate at any time. There's other cool ways to use this in other levels, like blowing up a bag of flour to blind nearby enemies. The other thing I liked is each battle had a unique objective. The first battle just had me defeat all the enemies, but the next one I needed to reach a point on a map within a time limit, and the last one had me defend NPCs for a certain number of turns. This made me approach each fight in a unique way. I had to use my skills in the environment in ways I previously hadn't thought about. What's nice is each new level gives you new characters, so the game is constantly building on itself, but it never feels overwhelming. That all said, I do have a few gripes. I don't know how to properly describe this, but the game overall felt sluggish. I felt like simple inputs required too many extra clicks or button presses, and it felt easy to misclick the wrong action with no way of going back. And the character animations are also really long, and there's no way to speed up the battles, so everything just felt really slow. Now, to be fair, this could be an unfair comparison coming off Dobbel Dungeon, which had a much quicker pace, but I really don't think so. I dug through the Steam community page, and quite a few others had similar feedback, and the devs seem to be taking that feedback in stride. One last thing worth mentioning, the game seems to have a choice system that affects the story. Now, I'm not sure how that plays out over the course of the game because the demo ended pretty much right after I made that choice, but I like when games do that, so it could be interesting. Overall, Calame has a lot of promise. The battles felt really engaging, and I liked having to use every tool in my toolkit instead of just throwing my strongest character into the fray. The presentation style is also really strong. I'll be curious to see how the dev team addresses the demo feedback in the final game. It's supposedly coming this year, so hopefully we don't have to wait too long to find out. By the way, this was a super fun video to work on. I love highlighting small games like this, so if you're enjoying the video and want more like it, definitely make sure to subscribe and like the video. It truly does help a ton. Next up, we have Signy and Mino Against All Gods. It's kind of a tricky game to summarize in a single sentence. At a quick glance, it kind of looks like Valkyrie Profile, but it's much more than that. The combat is this really cool mix of turn-based and real-time action built around comboing as many moves together as possible. I've had my eye on this one for a really long time, and the lead developer actually reached out with a review code, so big shout out to Sean for that. Let's take a look. So in the game, you play as Signy. As a child, an accident ravaged her village and now she lives with her grandma she calls Baba. Cut to present day and there's a power outage in her area, so she decides to go into town to get some supplies with her trusty dog Mino. While the game has some fun characters, it's pretty light on story. But thankfully, the gameplay here is really good. There's some light platforming and puzzle solving, nothing mega challenging, but still fun and satisfying. The vast majority of your time will be spent in the game's excellent combat system. Now, combat is built around building combos between Signy and Mino. For example, you can start off with a basic staff hit, launch the enemy into the air with Mino, and then whack it with a big swing. At the beginning, the combat is relatively simple, but still fun. But as the game goes on, you'll unlock a lot more skills and the ability to sustain longer combos, and that's where the real fun is. By the end of the game, you can get really crazy by air juggling, burying enemies underground, launching them back up into the air, and then repeating that cycle. Enemies also get more elaborate too. Instead of simply being open to all attacks, some enemies need their armor to be broken before you can deal damage, or some start buried underground. What's cool is if you defeat an enemy before your combo limit is finished, you can then go on to the next enemy and just keep it going. You'll have such a big arsenal of moves by the end of the game that you have a lot of room to get really creative with how you combo moves together. I genuinely never got bored of that combat system. It's just so fresh and fun. Now you can modify combat with chips. You craft them from different items that you gather through combat and just exploring. These can enhance certain moves, restore HP when you parry, and much more. I will say the game is relatively easy and I never really died, so depending on which chips you equip, it can make the game even easier. And depending on what kind of challenge you're looking for, definitely be careful what you equip. There's also a small skill tree that unlocks more moves, enhances existing ones, gives you the ability to have longer combos, and increases your HP. Now I maxed this out well before the end of the game, and if you explore it all, then you'll probably do the same. Now that's most of the gameplay, but there were somehow two mechanics I didn't engage with at all through the entire game. Near the end, the game gives you a checklist of things that you collected if you want to go back and collect everything before you finish. But for me, this said I didn't find a single aspect of self or grow a single flower, and the game is not exactly big. I feel like I explored every corner. I did find some fertilizer to grow flowers, but that was in the final dungeon, so I'm not sure if I missed something obvious somewhere or these systems are just not explained well, but in a relatively small game, I found this a bit strange. Besides the combat, I think the game's other big selling point is its visuals. The characters all have this really nice hand-drawn style that I think looks incredible. At times, the budget does start showing with relatively simple cutscenes and small environments, but overall, I thought the game looked awesome. Now this last bit is what I think will divide players on whether they're going to buy the game or not. It took me around 5.5 hours to finish, and the game is priced at $17. Now, I feel like the sweet spot would have been somewhere between $12 and $15, but either way, I really enjoyed my time and would definitely recommend checking it out. There's also a demo, so at the very least, go give that a try. Next up is the demo for Nocturne. This is an RPG with rhythm game mechanics for combat. I have no idea how this is going to work, but it intrigues me. The game also releases relatively soon, September 25th as of the recording of this video, and the demo is just the opening chapter of the game, so let's check it out. So the story premise here is really cool, and even though the developer says what the game's about on their Steam page, I really don't want to ruin it. I went in blind and found the intro of the game super compelling. I'll just say that it has a really unique premise and mystery that made me want to keep playing to see what happened next. One thing I will say about the story is that you play as a boy named Karma who's looking for his brother. As he's exploring, he finds a younger boy named Kimothy who explains to him that there's a guy named Satoru that might be able to help him out. But the twist is that Satoru is a half man, half fish. Why? Well, you're just gonna have to play to find out. As for the gameplay, Nocturne is unlike any RPG I've ever played before. As you explore the world, there are enemies you'll run into which starts combat. And combat is basically a short rhythm game segment. All the songs are original, which is awesome, and you're not actually fighting per se, just trying to finish the song without failing. And each song is about 30 seconds to a minute long for random enemies. However, later in the game, you do get the ability to attack, which basically just interrupts the enemy attacks. You can't finish the song faster by landing attacks or anything like that. Now, when you start the game, it gives you different difficulty options, and I'm pretty good at rhythm games, so I chose the middle option. However, there was just something about the button layouts and how fast the songs were that I just couldn't process fast enough. The buttons by default are mapped to the left and right bumpers, and on the right button on the D-pad and the X button on an Xbox controller. Now, you can remap those to whatever you want, which I definitely played around with a lot. but I just never really got used to it. I found myself pressing the wrong buttons all the time, even when I lowered the difficulty. By the end of the demo, I did get a little bit more comfortable with it, but still not 100%. And it might just be that I'm getting older and kind of losing my touch. I am 40 now, so I'm willing to accept that. The boss fight gets crazier though. The song is much longer and messed with the timeline, and it makes it more difficult. That said, I actually found this more enjoyable as I could actually get into a better flow with a longer song. This all said, I still had a lot of fun with this combat system, and if you like rhythm games, you probably will too. There's also these little corrupted objects that you'll find while exploring that you'll need to purify, and you'll need to play a short rhythm section to do so. These are much less challenging than battles and kind of put you into a zen-like mood. I also want to give a nod to the art here. It's really fantastic pixel art with a unique style. It was, however, a little hard to find exits to each zone at times, but overall, the presentation is incredible. Now, the demo did go beyond the end of the first chapter, skipping ahead to later in the game, but I was loving my time with it, so I didn't want to spoil myself, and I just kind of ended the demo right there. It took me about 90 minutes to finish the first chapter, and the trailer says the game is set to have 8 chapters in total, so this could end up being a pretty meaty experience. Even though I kind of sucked at the rhythm combat, I really like Nocturne. It has a super compelling premise, great presentation style, and a wholly unique combat system. This quickly became one of my most anticipated titles for the rest of 2026, and I highly recommend giving the demo a try. And finally, we come to Hermit and Pig. I'm sure the name and premise aren't doing it any favors, but after my review, I hope that it compels you to at least go give it a try. So the game starts and you play as this old hermit that lives alone in the woods with his pet pig. They decide to go exploring for mushrooms. And the game has a huge emphasis on mushrooms, from items you use in combat to a core part of the main story. Now, I'm not going to spoil that, but yes, that is 100% true. Now, eventually Hermit comes across this glowing blue mushroom that he decides to eat, which sends him on a wild trip. This unlocks a special ability for him, and this won't be the last trippy mushroom you'll eat during the game. Again, I'll leave the rest for you to find out for yourself, but I just love that tripping on magic mushrooms is a core part of the game. Now, after exploring for a little while, I came across this little girl. She's from the nearby town, and she tells Hermit that the town is in major trouble. The factory has been shut down, everyone lost their jobs and is going hungry. She came to find him in the hopes that he can help her forage for food to feed everybody. And this introduces one of the more interesting mechanics in the game. Because Hermit is, well, a hermit, he has social anxiety. And you can see this as he sweats when he walks up to talk to people. And these conversations kind of play out in turn-based combat. We'll be forced to pick different dialogue options. Usually the right choices are pretty obvious, but I love how silly the wrong ones are. It also ties into the story well because Hermit needs to get over his social anxiety in order to help all these people. But don't worry, there is traditional turn-based combat as well. It is, however, a little funky. At the beginning of the game, you're given this book full of moves that you use in combat. And these are simple actions like slap, kick, punch, stomp, and much more. Now, the way the developers intended you to play was to use 3-button inputs under a time limit for each attack. And enemies are weak to specific attacks, so you need to memorize all these inputs. Personally, I found this incredibly annoying as I kept needing to refer to the in-game book for the inputs. Now, mercifully, the game allows a more simplistic version where you can just pick them from a list, like a normal RPG. I appreciate them going for something a little different, but it just wasn't for me. What I found fun about this combat was the moves that enemies are weak to usually make logical sense. For example, if you run into a mosquito enemy, swatting it does more damage, or stomping on a roach does more damage. There's also active blocking on defense where you have to stop a bar in the right area, which I found pretty fun. Now, leveling is a bit odd. You don't increase stats, instead you get extra trinket points. And trinkets are basically equipment. Each trinket requires a number of trinket points to equip. These do everything from increase stats, make it easier to block, and see exact enemy health points. Kind of an interesting system that incentivizes exploration and getting all these different trinkets instead of grinding. And considering that most battles seem to be scripted, not random, I like that. Now, this is all great, but what really makes Hermit and Pig special is its whole vibe. The game is incredibly charming, fun, and cohesive. It feels like every piece of the game was implemented with specific intent. It's the little things like quips after you win a battle, or funny dialogue options, or cutscenes where you're tripping on magic mushrooms. It all just works together so well. And by the end of its 6.5-hour runtime, I was wishing there was more of it because I just fell in love with this gang of misfits. And for only $15, it's an absolute steal. If you only buy one game from this video, it should be Hermit and Pig. It's packed with value from beginning to end. No filler, no nonsense, just pure fun and charm. Now, I've actually made another video like this, so if you want to see other weird and underappreciated Steam JRPGs, watch this video next.